Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our three-part series on different types of writing documents that you need as an artist. We covered our first one, an artist bio. We then went into an artist statement, and today we are going to cover how to write an artist resume. So this is your first time joining us. I encourage you to go back and take a look at those other presentations. They're really helpful. And if it's your first time, welcome. I'm Alexandra Giordano. I'm a professor at SUNY Farmingdale College and St. Joseph's College of Art History, and I also work at the Hofstra University Museum of Art. So I've included much of the artwork I've included in this presentation for you is non-Western art. It's Asian, Eastern art. And I was trying to also find images that were kind of really calming and centering, as I know that this whole process can be really overwhelming. So I hope that you enjoy the artwork that I included on these images as well. The quote that I included here for you is, "Every artist was once an amateur," and by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I chose this because I think it's really applicable to probably everyone who's watching this in one way or another. Either you are new and you are starting out and you're kind of stressed because maybe you don't have a lot of content to put into a resume, or you're a more seasoned artist who maybe needs to think of their humble beginnings sometimes, be reminded of that, but also kind of think about editing your resume down and maybe taking things off that have been sitting on your resume for a long time, but it's appropriate to kind of get those things off and move on. So I just thought that that really kind of applied to what we were doing here. The first image I have here for you, I'm going to kind of follow along with what I have written in blue. An artist resume is a short document listing your key academic and professional achievements in reverse chronological order. So there's two important things to note here. Your resume is not long, 1 to 3 pages max, and usually 1 page is kind of really what you're aiming for. So it should be short and reverse chronological order. I'm going to be mentioning that a lot in this presentation. The idea that you are not going back to where you started. The first listing on your resume is going to be your most current position, your most current opportunity. So 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015. So that's what I mean by reverse chronological order. So artists use resumes to apply for residencies, exhibitions, jobs in galleries, teaching positions, right? So you really need to have one handy. A poorly crafted resume is like art. With poor symmetry, color, and composition, it will frustrate your viewer. So remember, you're applying for something, you see something, the first thing you're sending is your resume. So you really need to have it ready. Like, you don't want to see something and then go, oh, I need to now go put my resume together. And you want it to be like really clear and really direct. And that's what I have written here essentially for you. It is the essential element that very often galleries will use on their websites, or they will use in catalogs to kind of feature and highlight many of your accomplishments. So you have to make sure that you're choosing wisely and being clear about it. Don't make it complicated, right? It needs to be short and simple to review. So you're going to have your resume that's a little more straightforward versus something that we call a CV, or a curriculum vitae. And that is something often used in academia, and that's long, right? Like, that has every single thing that you've done. And your resume is going to kind of cherry pick from that CV. So all artists, I advise, have a standard up-to-date resume available, right? And that means you should, like I said, you should have it done. This is something that should be finished and completed. So when you go see an opportunity, you're able to just flush that right out and apply for anything. And sometimes you are going to move things around on your resume, and you are going to tailor it to specific purposes. So if it's a teaching position, you want to make sure all of your academic accomplishments are at the top of your resume. So it's really important to kind of do your resume by section, and then you kind of move those sections around depending on what you are applying for. And I have examples of that coming up soon. So let's kind of go to the next image here. I know, a lot of notes, but we're going to get through all of this together. Don't stress. As I just mentioned, keep a comprehensive master copy of your artist resume. Actually, my suggestion is even to just keep a marble notebook or a document on your computer that has everything that you've done. I mean, you don't judge what you've done. If you were a juror at something that you volunteered to do, put that down. Again, date, location, your position, everything that you did. Because you just want to always be documenting what you're doing. You don't want to say, when did I do that? And where was that again? So if you kind of have this running tab, it will help you write your resume. So that's really probably the first thing you're going to do if you don't even have one. You're going to kind of go back and fill in, again, some of these categories that I'm going to be showing you with accomplishments or achievements that you've had. Institutions receive dozens of submissions per week. So yours needs to be simple and straightforward. So you want to have easy to read fonts like Helvetica. You don't want anything fancy or swirly or anything with serifs. You want your type size to be no smaller than 10, right? You don't want anyone struggling and kind of squinting to read who you are and what you've done and where you were educated, etc. Use your white space well, right? You want to have areas of kind of rest on that page. Do not submit headshots. Do not use colored paper. Do not use colored fonts. Your art is where you're going to express your creativity. Here, you're going to be very professional, right? It's kind of like, this is where you're kind of wearing your suit to the interview. That's kind of a good way to think of your resume. I'm on the third bullet here, and this is really important. A beautifully prepared resume will not get you an exhibition opportunity if your art or its documentation is weak, but a poorly designed resume could cost you an opportunity. So you might have the most wonderful portfolio, your bio, your statement, everything is documented really well. And if your resume, it looks unprofessional or is weak, it could really cost you an opportunity. So you really want to work on that. As technology changes, make sure that you're staying current as well. And that's important to note because you always want to have your resume saved in a PDF and a Word document, right? Because I know I've had certain things that I've applied to, and it's like PDF only, Word document only. So always make sure that you're saving both and you have that ready to go. So both your resume and CV should be in what I've mentioned before, is this reverse chronological order. Okay, you really want to start with your most current and then kind of work your way backwards in a sense, right? To the thing that's furthest away or most in the past. And very often you are going, if you're not doing chronological order, because there are some exceptions, and I'm going to get to that. So if there are some exceptions, you're not doing chronological order, you want to think about listing things in alphabetical order. Okay, so you want to think about making sure there's some standardization as to how you're listing what you've done. Another exception to reverse chronological order is education. Right? So if you are applying for a teaching position or a residency that involves you taking on a TA position, then you want to have your education first, even if it was 10 years ago, or any teaching experience that you had, even if it's not the most current. So always chronological order, but if it's not, then you want to make sure you're using alphabetical order, or think of the category that you are applying to. Like I just gave you the example of education. And again, I have more examples coming for that. So down at the second bullet, kind of is a little bit more about that exception. So depending on your individual strengths as an artist, you might choose to kind of rearrange the recommended order that even I have on the next few images for you. Play to your strengths, right? So if you have, let's say I say put your honors or your awards third, or fourth or fifth. But let's say, you just got a major award and you were recognized, then you want to move that up. So when I get to that slide, I'll remind you of this. Some of these categories are not hard and fast in their order, but within the order, you really want to be chronological. I hope that makes sense. Like I said, I have examples coming up for you. So to recap, because I just gave you a lot of information, your basics. Your resume is a list of your professional experiences, achievements, and credentials organized into categories, and most, like 95% of the time, done in that reverse chronological order. The length of your resume, anywhere from 1 to 3 pages, depending on your experience and also depending on whatever it is that you're applying for. And sometimes they'll even say short resume, 1-page resume. You never, ever, ever want it to be more than 3 pages. They'll just kind of discard it and not even take a second look at it. So I want to say 2 pages often. If you're an experienced artist, you might really have that much to put on your paper. But if it's short and it's one page, don't dismiss that. A short resume, to be able to look at what someone has done and see their accomplishments, is really refreshing to people who have to read a lot of them. So keep that in mind. So here are some tips for you, best practices. As I said previously, you're going to maintain a list of everything that you have done, okay, in your professional history. So if you're starting out right now, that's the first thing that you're going to do. Just make your list, and then you'll get into the subcategories, as we move into them. So write everything down. Unlike your CV, the notes I have here, your resume is a fluid document. And again, it can be tailored and changed depending on what you are applying for. And I have some examples here, like an educator, a producer, a curator, a critic. You're going to move those categories around depending on what you're applying for. As you accumulate professional experiences, start to eliminate lesser listings. So that kind of gets back to what I was originally saying, where if you are a more seasoned artist, you want to edit things down. And I know I gave this example, I think I did in maybe the artist bio or artist statement presentation, but I know for myself, when I was a senior in college, I interned at an art gallery in New York City. And then when I graduated, I was hired, which was wonderful. Why internships are so valuable, right? I interned there in the city, even though I went to college in Pennsylvania. I came home every weekend and she hired me. And I worked there for 2 or 3 years as a gallery assistant, doing various, jobs in the gallery with the database, registrar, etc. And I had that on my resume for a really long time until I realized it's time to take that off my resume. We're now like 25 years later, and it was a really valuable experience because it was a small gallery, and I everything was hands-on, so I got to do everything when I was there, but it was time to take it off. So think about that as well. I'm just reinstating here what I'd said previously. Save your creativity for your artwork. Make sure your resume is really clean and neat, up to date, right? Like everything is really current and there's no grammatical or spelling errors. So of course you're going to go through your spelling check, but you also want to edit it because again, we know things like for can be spelled, F-O-U-R, F-O-R. A lot of silly mistakes can be made with spell check. So really make sure you're going through it very carefully and even have somebody else read it, which is helpful. And again, reminding you here, making sure that you have a PDF version as well as a Word document saved. So here's some information. Now we're going to kind of get to the nuts and bolts, what you need to include on your resume. Contact information. So your name, mailing address, phone number, email, anything that kind of, again, is going to help people locate you. A really short bio. And I have examples at the end of this presentation. When I say this, I'm not trying to confuse you with your real artist's bio. This is like a 1-sentence experienced graphic designer looking for full-time employment. Like you are just kind of one short little sentence there. This can be as simple as the year and place of your birth, where you live and work now, but really it's typically even geared more to like what you are applying for. You want to list your achievements. And again, list the most recent events, and then going back in that reverse chronological order. I have another checklist for achievements and a few of these other topics as well. Exhibitions. Right? Have you had solo exhibitions? Have you had group exhibitions? 2-person exhibitions? Anything, again, solo or 1 person, you really want to highlight that. You can asterisk, you can include the curator's name, were you published in these exhibitions, things like that. This is, again, going to be the meat of your resume. And I have more details coming up on this. Collections. Any corporate collections or institutions or well-known individuals that might have collected your work. These, or, the college that you went to, did you exhibit there and did they keep one of your pieces? Anything like that, you want to include on your resume in that topic. A few tips for you. And this is, again, kind of a good time to kind of recap a little bit. Be creative, put yourself in the juror's or the buyer's shoes. So, and when I say be creative, I don't mean creativity on your actual resume, I mean in moving around those categories. What is the first category that that person is going to see? If you're applying for an exhibition, it should be exhibitions. If it's a teaching position, it should be teaching, right? If it's a graphic design position, it should be any freelance or graphic design work that you've done. So if award, and this is exactly what I have written here, if your awards are your career's most shining moment, then you do want to put that first. So that's one of those exceptions that I had even mentioned to you previously. So just a few examples here. If you graduated from the California Institute of the Arts with the highest honors, then you do want to show that first, even before the exhibitions that you've been featured in. Maybe you had a show at the Peter Freeman Gallery in New York City, and there's not a lot else, maybe just your education and a freelance job, then you move that category right to the top. So again, these are some of the exceptions. If Banksy personally praised you, same thing, top of the resume. Are you applying for a job as a curator? Excuse me. If you've already held other curator positions, you put that to the top. And again, just to remind you, you're moving these different categories around depending on what you're applying for, but all the information within each category is in that reverse chronological order. So, and that's what this pro tip here is basically, right, in blue, that means last job first. I mentioned a few exceptions on this slide, but again, you can break this rule of reverse chronological order if there's something like mind-blowing that you've done, right? So you had an exhibition at MoMA, that goes first. This is your time to brag, okay, on your resume. And the way that you do it is not flowery language, but it's where you're placing things on your resume. That's something to think about. If you have something really, really important at the bottom, you got to get that to the top, right? Because that's what's going to pull you in. You know, I worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. For many years, I put that first, just because it was name recognition. So really think about how you're moving these categories and subcategories around. This is the list that I've been mentioning to you. And you want to make sure that you have as many of these categories on your resume. And I'll get to some of the exceptions in a moment. Your name, your education, any grants or awards that you've received, commissions, any collections, public, private, corporate, a bibliography. Again, now I have a note here for you, and I'm going to explain this to you. Bibliographical entries are entries of reviews, articles, books, or catalogs, etc., that are published about you and your work. Any reviews of your work, the inclusion of your work in books, magazines, newspaper, exhibition catalogs, anything online, any media that you have kind of been included in, you would put that here in your bibliography. And you, after a number of publications are accumulated, you might want to, again, edit this down. So this is kind of where you have been featured. That differs from number 8, which is publications as an author, right? Anything that you've written, any critical writings, reviews, blogs. Did you have an opportunity ever to write a catalog exhibition? Excuse me, kind of like that nice little text that's included in many catalogs. Did you get to write about that, right? Anything that you've written goes in number 8. So I'm kind of stressing that because it could be a little confusing. Number 7 is anything that's been written about you. Number 8, any publications that you have authored or co-authored, or maybe you even edited something. Maybe you edited some art historical text. That's where you would put this in publications. Teaching or any type of related experience. So that could be, and this could be 9A and 9B, because maybe you have some teaching experiences at an art studio, in a photography studio. Maybe you have, anything teaching related. But then related experience, 9B, if I can kind of separate it like that, could be any freelance experience you have. Have you worked as a freelance graphic designer, a window display artist? Anything like that would be a number 9. So it could be either or both. Have you given any lectures or any workshops, any presentations, any artist talks? And I mean anywhere, ever, you want to make sure that you include that. Any curatorial projects. Again, even if you co-curated something, this is where you want to list everything that you've done. And again, in reverse chronological order. You have the date, you have what you have done, and then you have a one line that kind of summarizes what you had done. Any gallery affiliations. Are you on any client list? Do you have any client affiliations with designers? You want to include that as well. And again, the pro tip that I have here, make sure the submission guidelines allow for PDFs if you're submitting a PDF. And another note to consider here is that if you're applying for something really specific, make sure you use the words in that application on your resume. That might mean that you have to go and kind of like change out some of the language that you've used. Like maybe you said it one way and you're applying for the job clearly because you've done the work, but take the language from the application and try to use that language in your resume, because many opportunities, they will kind of almost have a computer scan through these resumes and they'll pull out the key words from the application. And I feel like that's something really valuable to note, because a lot of artists don't know that that's what's happening. So you might be saying the same thing, but if you don't have some key words from the application in your resume, the computer could just scan right over you and you don't get that opportunity. So that's really important to jot that down and keep that in mind. Anything that I apply for, I actually print it out and I compare it to my resume and see where I can pull in certain language. Now, here are some of the topics and a little bit of an explanation for each one of them. So when I mention commissions or public art projects, you want to make sure you're listing the title of the commissioned work, public project, date, sponsor, any awards or honors. Again, recent awards go first, working backwards. There's that reverse chronological order. Again, projects, grants, prizes that have been won, any related professional work, teaching positions, lectures given. This is just a little bit more of an explanation of those topics that I showed you on the previous page. Again, bibliography, if you're mentioned anywhere, you want to include it. I have a note here in blue, and I've even included the link for you within this presentation, that if you're ever kind of uncertain as to how you should be noting articles that you've been mentioned in, or even articles maybe that you've edited or written, refer to the Chicago style, that manual, the link that I have here for you, because it will tell you exactly how a magazine, I know we don't really even use magazines anymore, but how certain publications should be, what's italicized, what is underlined, what comes first, etc. And again, if you are a recent graduate for education, this should be your first or second category, right? So if you are a young artist and you don't have a lot of these, you may not have a lot, right? Then you want your education to be first. And again, any awards, a thesis topic, if you had a senior exhibition, what was the title of that senior exhibition? You want to include as much as you can in this education area if you are a young artist starting out. So a few more tips for you, tips on your header. So you have your resume, you have all of the topics that I just mentioned, right, in chronological order, but along the top of your paper is your header. And you want to make sure that, as I mentioned previously, you have every way for the person who's going to hire you to get in touch with you. And these are just some of the things you want to make sure that you have: name, mailing address. You want to have a cell phone number or multiple numbers where you can be reached. You want to have a website there if you have a website. And if I could summarize the notes that I have here for you, another thing to think about is that whatever that format is on your header, that can also be on your letter of application. Like when you have to write a letter that says, I'm applying for this position, please see my resume, you want your headers to match. And again, you want it to be eye-catching. You want your name to be really big. And then all of, again, your contact information really, really visible right at the top. So just a few more pages on notes and examples for you. If you don't, again, anywhere on your resume, but this is what your education should look like, right? So this is a good example of reverse chronological order. Notice the font that I'm using is really, really easy to read, right? It's not really complicated or swirly. It's very straightforward. And it's your best stuff first, right? So you have an MFA, or you don't, actually in this instance, you don't have an MFA, you're a candidate. Don't say, well, I haven't graduated, so I can't put that on my resume. Oh no, you want people to know that you are in an MFA program, and you can put candidate with your expected graduation. This person here, in now 3 years earlier, received their BFA. 5 years earlier, their BA in a completely different subject. So again, do not discredit anything. In 2000, oh, I don't know why that's, sorry, that is out of order here. I should really go back and correct that. Memphis College of Art, and then a summer session in France. So again, even if you didn't get a degree from somewhere, put that down. And again, I know that I mentioned previously how I had taken classes at the Art Students League. I didn't get a degree. I just took a lot of classes in anatomy. So that's on my resume. And just an example for you of how to list your exhibitions in that category, in that, in that topic area. Reverse chronological order, really straightforward font, easy to read. And then again, distinguishing between a solo exhibition, a group exhibition, a two-person exhibition, right? You could see here the format that you would want to follow. Titles are in italics, so you want to make sure that the titles of any of these exhibitions are in italics, as you see here, and the date is the first thing that I see. So I can say, oh, this person has shown recently, in 2012, they had a solo exhibition. That's important to note. So I thought these were two good examples for you, so you can kind of really see how you would format your resume. And then these last 3 images that I have here for you are just basic formats that you can follow. These are a little more current and up to date, and that's why I'm showing them to you. I know sometimes we think of a resume and we just think, at least for me, I think of just like a real kind of like running list of everything. And again, these categories are really important in the way that you feature and highlight your accomplishments. So the way that this is split, right, you kind of have 2 columns, obviously the wider one focusing more on your experience and exhibitions, and then all of your contact information put in that thinner column, and some special skills that you have, where you could be found on social media. And in this instance, the education is featured down at the bottom. It's there, but it's just down at the bottom, because this is really focusing more towards a different opportunity outside of education. So I really like this format. It's a really current format, and it's a different way for you to kind of lay out your work. Now, this person essentially used black font, and they just highlighted their categories in a different color. And you can do that, even though I said don't use like crazy colors. The way that you can see this is done is like really professional, and it's almost, the color is added almost in a way to kind of lead the viewer through the resume. And I think that that was really smart in the way that they laid that out. Another example for you here is professional profile right at the top, professional experience. And then again, this person kind of did the double column system as well. Key skills, contact information, education, and then down at the bottom, an award that was received that isn't really necessarily relevant to their professional work, but yet still shows that they are hardworking and exemplary in their work ethic. So I thought it was smart for them to include that kind of away from the professional experience, because it doesn't necessarily relate. I'm also using these examples for people who are just starting out, because you can see here that a lot of the experience that they have is more descriptive about jobs that they have. There's not a lot of exhibitions that are included, or commissions that are included, or awards that are included. And that's okay. You shouldn't feel like, oh, I don't have enough to put on my resume, because you can see the ones here are from people who are a little bit younger. And one more example for you, for this photographer. Again, really straightforward, easy to read, double column system, kind of giving highlights about what they've done in each position, and not a terribly long resume. And that's for a lot of us. If you haven't been working for 20 or 30 years, you might not have a 2 or 3 page resume. And I wanted to use these as examples so you don't get discouraged. The link that I've included here for you is just one of the many that you can find on the internet that will actually give you a template. And so once you come up with your categories and once you write everything down and you figure out everything that you've done, you can plug your information into some of these templates. And again, using some of these free, and they're free sites, then your resume looks current and up to date. And it's not like you're presenting a resume that looks like it's from the 1980s, but instead it looks like it's from 2021. And that's important, that you kind of maintain a current look and aesthetic, even in a resume, that that's how you're presenting yourself for an opportunity that hopefully will come your way. And my last image here is just some of the research that I did to kind of collect some of this information. And you're free to kind of go and look on any of these sites for any further information. But I really kind of went to all these and kind of hand plucked a lot of the information that you need to put together a current up-to-date resume. So I hope that this helped. I look forward to seeing all of you in our Q&A. By all means, listen to the presentation, jot down any questions that you have, and we will be meeting next Friday to have a conversation and hopefully answer any more questions you have in regard to a resume. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.